All right, guys. Bryan Lentz. Bryan, just a sec. I think everybody remembers Joe came and visited us last year. Just want you guys to realize that this is all a really big compliment to this company. We've become known as a local manufacturer who's succeeding and doing things in a way that allows us to keep growing and adding U.S. workers. And so if you want to come see how we're doing that, which is a big compliment to all of you guys. So Bryan is the Democratic candidate for Joe's seat, and we just did a plant tour. He's very impressed by all of your efforts and the way the workflows work and how much you guys are involved in improving your own work. So he's going to say a little bit, and then I promised him you guys would have questions.
Sure. Well, thank you all very much. I will not talk long because I don't want to show up on somebody's board as an excuse for not making the quota there. But I'm really happy to be here and have an opportunity to tour the factory and see what you're doing. If I go to Congress, this is exactly the kind of place I want to represent. I want to ask myself, when I'm on the floor of the House, how does this vote impact you folks in a business like this? Because this is what everybody talks about, right? We all talk about making stuff in America and having jobs where people are making things, and not only selling them here, but selling them overseas. We want more of that. And so I'm doing a 25-stop tour to get ideas from people, because when I decided to run for Congress, I didn't all of a sudden become the smartest guy in the world. I still am the same guy I was the day before I decided to run for Congress, and I need to get ideas from people that are at the ground level, or in the factories, in the neighborhoods, in the communities. Tell me what you think I should be working on if I get to Washington, D.C. Just real quick, I'd say my background is, my first job out of college was I was an airborne ranger in the Army. I never went to sniper school, but I did go to ranger school, and I worked with a lot of snipers, so I appreciate that one product you guys are working on for the snipers. And that was the first, most informative experience I had, was being an airborne ranger in the Army. And I always tell people, if they wake me up in the middle of the night and put a flashlight in my face and say, "What are you?" I'll say, "I'm an airborne ranger." After that, I became a prosecutor in Philadelphia. I prosecuted crime for 6 years in the city of Philadelphia, gang violence primarily. And then I became a state legislator. I represent people in Delaware County in the State House. And I hope to represent those of you who live in the congressional district in Washington, D.C. And as I said, my first question will not be, is it a Democratic idea? Is it a Republican idea? The question would be, is it an idea that's going to make a positive impact on the people I was hired to represent? And I think if you ask people about me, they'll tell you that that's the way I've been in Harrisburg. I've worked with Republicans on bills like cracking down on the hiring of illegal immigrants and designating them as independent contractors to avoid paying the kind of taxes and other revenue that companies like this pay every day to contribute to our state. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad for what you're doing, and I'm happy now to answer any questions, so long as they're not controversial. That's supposed to be fun. Any questions? I'm happy to take them. Don't be shy. I won't be
here.
Sir.
We all know that the special interests in this country are extremely powerful.
Yes.
What do you do to get the power back into the hands of the people instead
Well,
of special interest groups?
But special interest groups are way too powerful. And sometime this week, you're going to start seeing commercials on television paid for by special interests. And that's on both sides. Both Democrat and Republican, there are going to be hundreds of millions of dollars spent on commercials. And unfortunately, commercials drive too much of our politics. I spend a lot of time raising money because if you're going to win an election, everybody tells you got to be on TV. So one way is to get involved. I know people, you're working a full shift here, and you get home, you got to take care of your family and help your kids with their homework. And when somebody says get involved, you say, who has time? But the truth is, if people pay attention and people participate in politics, the people always can override the special interest. And I'll give you an example. If you really take the time to talk to your neighbors and your friends about the issues facing the country, and turn the TV off, don't watch the commercial, then I think you're, just by doing that, by talking about it around the dinner table, by having a real conversation here in the workplace, then you can have a positive impact on the outcome. But in the long term, the big thing we have to do is get that money out of politics. The Supreme Court ruled this year that corporations, major corporations, can spend unlimited amounts of money influencing elections. And that means, what I didn't misspeak, that means unlimited amounts of money influencing elections. And that's not just corporations, and unions and any other group that has a lot of money to spend. That's not how we should run our campaigns, because you as an individual, you can't spend as much money as ExxonMobil or whatever union organization. Your voice should be as loud as theirs. So I think we need comprehensive campaign finance reform. Not just so that the big people can't buy elections, but also so that individuals like myself running for office aren't constantly worried about raising money as opposed to passing good laws for the people of their district. And I'll give you an example. A member of Congress, this is a fact, a member of Congress, a person that's already in office, spends about 40 hours a week raising money on the phone asking people for money. Now, you tell me, with the complex issues that our country faces, how you can be a good legislator if you spend 40 hours a week asking people for money. And, as my grandfather used to say, try to count to 10 without thinking of a red squirrel, right? I've tried it, you can't do it. Try to pass a bill without thinking of who gave you money. And that's really the big problem on both sides of the aisle in Washington with our politics. People vote, whether they're good people or not, they can't help but think, if I vote this way, if I take this course of action, how's that going to affect my ability to raise money and stay in office? So those are two big things: campaign finance reform, getting money in. The biggest thing, in my opinion, is you can't care about getting reelected more than you care about doing a good job. And I'm 46. I've done other things in my life, and I can do other things in my life. I want to go to Washington to do some positive things for the country. If I get there and I serve one term, life goes on. If I serve 10 terms, life goes on. You can't have your first priority being your own survival. Your first priority's got to be what's good for the people, what's good for the country. Anyone else?
Actually, it's Joe. Where's Joe? Can I move that now?
One of my concerns is high taxes.
Yes.
And I apologize in advance for not doing all my homework, but I recently heard the FSA contributions are going to be abolished. I don't know if that's something we know about, but I heard that was part of the healthcare,
Still blowing the water, that's all right.
Oh, yeah.
part of the healthcare plan that was just
Is this anybody?
passed. So, one, do you know if that's true, if the FSA money that's pre-tax now coming out of our paychecks will be federally taxed beginning of
Talking
next
about
year?
the,
We run a cafeteria plan, health savings account.
Our health savings
that
account,
people can contribute their own money, and don't even get me started with the waste process of the government deciding whether or not you spent your money the way you said you were going to spend your money. But anyway, people contribute their own money to an account pre-tax, which they can then use for child care or purchasing prescriptions, paying their co-pays, paying their deductible.
I have to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question, whether that tax break went away with the healthcare legislation, but I'll find out.
Okay.
And I'll get back to you on it.
And how do you feel in general about the tax level now and reduction of taxes?
Well, no one likes taxes, me included. I'm in Delaware County. How many people here live in Delaware County?
A lot.
We pay the highest property taxes in the entire state. I pay just under $10,000 a year property taxes, and I'm sure if you live here, you don't pay. Nobody that lives in the county pays any less than $3,000, $3,500. And property taxes is really one of the most onerous, particularly if you're retired and you have static income and you don't have children in the school district and Social Security doesn't go up. The property taxes is a big problem. So let me just start with that. And when I go around, I knock on doors, I tell people the number one complaint I get is property taxes. Now, property taxes, of course, are controlled by your local school board. But one of the dynamic that I've learned in Harrisburg is the more the state does, the less the local people have to do. So the state contribution to education funding, which doesn't have anything to do with increasing taxes. We haven't. I've been there 3.5 years. The only tax we increased was on tobacco. I'm sorry to the smokers, but that was the only tax we increased. But we have increased substantially the state's share of education funding. The more the state does, the less the local property tax have to do. Now, everybody in Delaware County went up dramatically this year. Southeast Delco, I think, was the highest. They went up 12.4% in 1 year. Again, that's local property taxes. There's a lot of things driving that. Chiefly, pensions and healthcare are the real cost drivers, and those two areas. You know, healthcare, we hope over the long term is going to decline in cost as we get more people in the system and we enact some of the reforms with the delivery of healthcare. Pensions, we need dramatic reform because the state next year is going to be about $5 billion short of what their obligation is to pay for the budget and to pay. If the state doesn't do it, your property tax bill next year is going to probably double. So I think the state is better able to handle it than the local property taxpayer, and local property taxes is the least reflective of how much you're making, right? How much you have, because it's just connected obviously to your house and where you live. So the first thing I think is the state's got to do its share when it comes to property taxes. I think that we're all for lowering individuals' taxes. I think that, for instance, the taxes for people that earn less than $250,000, we ought to keep that tax cut in place. And as we go forward and we start to get more of a handle on the debt, we ought to increase that tax cut. I don't think we should be cutting it for people that make $1 million or more. If you make $1 million or more, which is a very small percentage of the people in our country, you know,